I get a lot of questions in my office about something's eating my tree. What do I spray? 99.9% of the time, you don't have to do anything. Our native insect species, they eat our tree leaves, but not to the point where it's going to kill the tree.
Or severely damage it.
Yeah, so having a little bit of feeding damage on your trees, that's fine. That just means you have it'll recover, and it means you have a healthy ecosystem. Now, certainly, if you're concerned it could be something harmful, you can contact your local extension office, contact me, and I can identify insects. But 99% of the time, it's nothing to be concerned about.
Hey everyone, welcome back for another episode of At Home with Emily, a podcast about creating a life you love. I'm so happy today that we have Kelly McGowan with us from the University of Missouri Extension Office right here in Springfield, Missouri. And today, Kelly and I are visiting one of our favorite topics to help all of you out with, and that is pests and insects. And as we know, most insects are completely harmless and may even be helpful for our lawn and landscape, but there are also those that are there to destroy it.
Right. Yes, yes.
Those are the ones that we're going to focus on today, and then we'll mention the helpful ones to look out for too. But I wanted to start, Kelly, with a topic that you and I have discussed at length before, which is here we are. It's in the middle of the summer, and man, these things are dying out. And I've been watering them, and I've got water on them every day, and it's just not enough. Right. I have been there. You've been there. Most of us have been there. And lo and behold, it's not a water problem. And so what we are talking about, of course, is the bagworms, which we never really know how bad they're going to be, if they're going to be festering, but they are still around. I still see them from time to time. Yep. What are the bagworms? What do they like to feed on? Where do they like to cocoon? Where do we find them? And why do we need to be aware of them?
All right. Well, so bagworms, they are actually a wingless moth.
Okay.
And the female lives inside of a bag. And the bag she makes out of foliage from whatever plant she's on. Most of the time we see bagworms on evergreen shrubs. We do see them on other types of plants too, but you can see the little brown bags hanging everywhere on the plant. And what happens is...
If you know to look for them.
If you know to look for them, yes. And the female is well protected in that bag, and she sticks her head out and she feeds on the foliage, and she can also have lots of babies, and so the population can explode quickly, and if you don't keep it under control, it can eventually kill the plant.
Well, and two, the evergreens are something that you almost just don't even worry about if they're not new.
Right.
If they're not in their first season, you kind of go on autopilot because they always look great. They're always there. Yeah. And then I think it's a little alarming when you notice that your evergreen is dead.
Right.
Because they start dying in the inside, right, in the middle first. Yeah. And then by the time that you normally notice it, what do you look for with the bagworms? To me, it looks like a cocoon. It
does.
It looks like almost she's taken a thread and wrapped herself up in there. And they're, maybe a half inch to an inch?
Yeah, half inch to an inch is the typical size. Yes, that's right.
And so is that something we should be inspecting for every so often?
Yeah, I would really encourage you, now that we're getting into spring, and people are spending time outdoors, scout your plants and look for these bagworms. And if you do find them on your plants, you can pick them off. You can hand pick them off. They don't sting. They don't bite. But hand pick them off and don't just throw them on the ground, because they can crawl back up on the tree again or plant. And so make sure that you dispose of them properly. And that is a really good way to keep them under control.
Do you just put them in like a lawn and garden bag, or like a plastic bag?
Yeah, just put them in a plastic bag. You could certainly do something like that, but just don't drop them on the ground, because they're still alive, and there could be eggs in there as well. Yes, lots of eggs.
So we've definitely had those, okay? And I would say we get them more often than not. once they find their spots, that's kind of where they're living. And plus, we're near wooded areas. And so, obviously, they're happy in those areas.
Right.
They could just stay in the woods and not come to my yard. But why would they do that? It's a little unnerving when you start picking them off at first.
Right.
Because you drop one and then you're like, oh, no, they're going to get back onto the plant.
Yeah.
You really do have to make sure they're sealed up and thrown out.
Absolutely. Or dispose of them in any way that you feel like you should dispose of them, but they need to be disposed of as soon as possible.
And again, is it just the warning signs of you're trying to find them prior to seeing the dying out of the shrubs, right?
Yes, the earlier you can catch it, the better, by far.
And by the way, they will take down a 10, 20-foot tree.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
I mean, it sounds small, but to try to replace a tree like that is very pricey.
Oh, yes, several $100s. So we want to scout and get this problem under control.
Okay, so bagworms, that's something that we see in our area.
Right.
And then another thing that I know that we see, especially like around the lake, but just anywhere in Southwest Missouri, Northwest Arkansas, is we are seeing the Japanese beetles again.
Right. Well, fortunately, the Japanese beetle populations in our area have not been as high as they were, in years past. When Japanese beetles first, appeared in our area, they were a new insect species and they didn't have a lot of natural predators. But now that we've had them for a while, they are starting to get natural predators. And while we do have a few, we don't have the, massive populations that we once did. And so that is definitely a good thing.
So on the Japanese beetle,
yes,
we're looking at it's green, or how big is it? What does it look like normally?
They're probably about 1/4 of an inch in length.
Okay.
And they are going to be metallic green. Now, we do have some other native beetle species that are also green, but Japanese beetles tend to be more metallic in color. They have white hair tufts on their legs, so there are some differences, but for the most part, they're very easy to identify.
And so what do we need to be on the lookout for with the Japanese beetles? Can they do harm?
They can. So they tend to feed in large groups. So you'll have a lot come in and feed on the plant. And while they can defoliate the plant and it doesn't look good once they've been feeding, they will rarely kill a plant.
Okay.
And, they usually will show up in this area about June, and a lot of plants will still have time to put on new leaves if they do get defoliated. So while they do cause some damage, it's not permanent.
And is there any little, tip or trick that you can do to sort of dissuade them from coming to your plants in your yard?
Well, I don't recommend the traps. The traps, they will typically attract more beetles than would have been there anyway. So don't use the traps. There are some applications for the traps, but for homeowners, we don't recommend those. Really, there's not a lot to, to kind of not to
go somewhere else. Stay away.
There's not really a lot that you can do. You don't have to do anything. So they'll only be here for a short period of time, and then they're gone.
Okay.
And so you don't have to do anything.
It's not like the bagworms where they're going to take down a massive part of your landscape in a matter of weeks.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the other beetle I was thinking about was probably the Asian ladies.
Right.
You said that they're really not even native to our area. We're not exactly sure why they're here. What's going on with those this year?
Yeah, well, Asian lady beetles are kind of a cousin to our native lady beetle, and
they look like a ladybug.
They do. They look exactly like them,
which we know are friendly to our plants.
Right. Yeah, they're a beneficial insect. But the Asian lady beetle, while they can also be beneficial, they like to spend the winters inside of our homes. They're not native to this area, so they can't handle the cold. They can't handle the winter, so they come in our homes, and they can
nice and cozy
stain
in
walls. They can smell.
Yes.
So they can cause problems as well.
And so what is that? Is that just a matter of sealing up your property, or?
Yeah, making sure you don't have any cracks under doors or around windows. That's probably the number one way to keep them out of your house, especially around attics. They can find any little place to get in. Yeah.
And is there anything else that we're not thinking about when it comes to protecting our lawn and landscape? Any other critters out there that we need to be on guard for this year?
Well,
other than the deer.
I get a lot of questions in my office about something's eating my tree. What do I spray? 99.9% of the time, you don't have to do anything. Our native insect species, they eat our tree leaves, but not to the point where it's going to kill the tree.
Or severely damage it.
Yeah, so having a little bit of feeding damage on your trees, that's fine. That just means you have it'll recover, and it means you have a healthy ecosystem. Now, certainly, if you're concerned it could be something harmful, you can contact your local extension office, contact me, and I can identify insects. But 99% of the time, it's nothing to be concerned about.
And the last one that I've seen personally, we had a tree that a woodpecker was just going to town on. Yes. And you hear about that from time to time. And at first, it's kind of funny. It wakes you up in the morning because they're just pecking away at that tree. But then suddenly the tree is full of holes, and you're just kind of wondering, are they trying to get something detrimental out of the tree, or are they hurting the tree?
Right.
It's a debate. We have this debate as neighbors all the time. What are the woodpeckers doing, and do we need to be worried about them?
Maybe. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So woodpeckers, they feed on insects underneath the bark of trees, and they don't drill into the tree deep enough to kill it.
Okay.
So even if you have a little bit of woodpecker feeding damage on a healthy tree, it's not going to kill the tree.
What if you have a lot of
If you have a lot,
damage?
there is probably something else going on. And one example I would like to give is an ash tree. So I live on Table Rock Lake, and we have a lot of ash trees. Ash trees have been decimated by another beetle called emerald ash borer. And they feed on ash trees, and they will eventually kill the tree. The woodpeckers are going after the grubs of that. And so if you have a tree with really heavy woodpecker damage, it could be an ash tree that they're going after those grubs, or it could be some kind of other issue where there's an excessive amount of insects living in the tree. And it might be a good idea to call an arborist or call your local extension office, and we can help to kind of troubleshoot that. But if there's a lot of damage, there's probably something else going on.
And is there any way to dissuade the woodpecker from your tree?
Yeah.
Because they're pretty persistent.
They're pretty persistent, and there's not a lot of tried and true things that you can do. Scare tactics, anything you can do to scare them away, hanging aluminum pie pans in your tree, anything that's going to kind of move in the wind and maybe make some noise can help to scare them away, and that's really the best thing you can do.
Okay.
Yeah.
As always, Kelly, thank you so much for all the insights and all the things to think about as we head into the pretty summer season and try to protect our yards and also help the environment the best that we can.
Absolutely. You're welcome.
And thank you guys so much for joining us for this episode of At Home with Emily. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, please be sure like and subscribe so you're notified when our next episode drops. We drop a new one every Wednesday. You can also head to aroundtheozarks.com to sign up for our daily newsletter. And you can always follow Around the Ozarks on social media. We'll see you next time.